All right. Billy.
Trent Frederick traded.
Yes. So does the timing of this trade make you think they're going to be moving more pieces?
Yeah, I do. Between that trade, which I think I think we talked about a little here. We talked about a lot on Saturday's show because I'd heard Edmonton was interested, Washington as well. Two teams that were very interested in Trent, and it obviously worked out going to Edmonton. And wonderful kid. Want to see him succeed. Good luck to him. He's a pleasure. I just want to say a pleasure to deal with all the time. So good for him in the sense of he'll be missed, but thank you to Trent for being such a good guy to deal with. I hope he does well there. Fred, I do think there's absolutely more to come. Does it mean that there's going to be a significant, when I mean a significant, meaning bigger name type trade between now and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern? That I don't know. But I do think there will be a trade of some stature between now and, let's say, the draft, which is what you're going to go to with your wife in late June, as I heard Hardy.
Yeah, that was
LA.
that was Billy's guess as to what my surprise gift was.
But I do think there will be another one of those. But, Fred, there will be another move. I cannot imagine that there isn't between now and Friday at 3 o'clock.
Okay, how about the return?
Happy with it in the sense of, all right, it's basically a three-way type trade. When it's all said and done, it's Frederick and Jones, and you get a second and a fourth, and then you get this prospect. The prospect is a depth piece. You hope, ... one day he can help out, but you never know. Okay, move on from that. The second-round pick, in theory, could end up being a high second-round pick. You have an asset that was not having a good year, was injured right now, but he'll be back in a couple of weeks. And you made a decision, an organizational decision, you weren't going to re-sign him. So it's good value back. Now, this is the obvious comment here, you have to take advantage of that. Now, whether you use that pick to trade to make a pick or you use it to trade for something else, another asset, you have to be willing. You got to do it well, and they're going to have to draft better.
All right. Does this – because we had heard that from some people around the organization, they didn't think Marchand would fetch a number one pick. And I
don't know. When I was at the Stadium Series, and a lot of people there working that game, and a lot of people talking about they hear that there's a lot of teams interested.
So yeah, just by basis of Frederick getting a second in return, you would think that Marchand would be worth a lot more than Frederick, given they're both expiring contracts.
And I think it was you that said it when I caught a little of you guys this morning driving to skate about that it's going to be if this is so dependent on he's going to a top team if a player of his ilk is being traded.
Right.
He's going to a top team if, right?
Right.
So they're going to be willing to move a much more likely to move a first round pick because in theory that first round pick also will be, let's call it in the bottom 8 of the draft. And so they're going to say, okay, we're willing to do that.
Yeah.
But it can't just be, in my opinion, for a player like him, a pick. There has to be more to it as well. There's more. I've talked about it on your show. I've talked about it with Ty on Saturday's show. We've talked about it on Morning Brew, Jaffe and Razor. There's more value. There's value there. And it's real easy to sit here and say, just go, just trade for a first-round pick. I would say no, you need something, an asset that you can get back.
It would be a first in a
legit prospect,
a legit prospect, or a player who's playing currently.
And you may have to add something to that, meaning to the trade, like they did, and they got creative, and now they moved the Max Jones. Let's not forget, it didn't work out at all with Max Jones here, but he was also signed for next year, which means that you've moved. It's just $1 million on the cap. That's not the big deal. It's also the contract. Mm-hmm. You're allowed 50 NHL contracts max. Most teams usually hover 48, 49. To keep room for these type of things. Now they're at 44 right now. So it's somewhat small, but it's also bigger than I think people realize that they're opening up NHL contracts at this time.
Last night, and again, I don't want to break down every game.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
It's like over now, but it is interesting. You were kind of getting into the mentality of where the players would be right now. And, they're human beings. There is some concern. I know Carlos publicly said it. Carlos, it's bugging him, up until the trade deadline because, it's uncertainty. I mean, I can put myself in someone's shoes is that if you said, oh, by the way, like sometime this week, you could be moving anywhere in North America. Mm-hmm. Like there's, 31 places where you could be moving or whatever.
If you don't have protection, yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't, you could be going, well, hey, Trent Frederick, you're going to Edmonton.
Right.
Exactly.
But they like Edmonton, right? Like Edmonton never seems to be on the worst list. It's always Winnipeg and Buffalo. Like
I would say, Winnipeg, Buffalo, Ottawa would be there. But some guys don't want to go. I mean, it depends where you live and where you're from and everything. Edmonton, but you know why Edmonton isn't on a lot of guys' no trade now? Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Oh, yeah.
And an unbelievable arena. But on the other hand, the city of Edmonton is...
Well, that's my point, is that it's always been of interest to me talking to guys in the game that you would assume that Edmonton's in Alberta. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a nothing city. It's terrible weather. You wouldn't want to move there, but yet...
But if you have a chance to win.
But there's some allure with the franchise, I guess.
Gretzky.
The whole Gretzky thing. So,
but it's on more people's no trade than other places.
Sure.
And a lot of guys now are basing no trades based on organizational reputation, but also on tax situation.
Yeah. Well, the Rangers are on some guys no trade.
Yeah, they don't want to go play in New York City.
Yeah.
They don't want to go deal with that.
All right. So
they're without 3-4 guys. Well, more now.
Yeah.
Freddie gone. And they have the trade realization. It's in front of them, to your point. They're humans. They understand it. They probably don't like it. But the fact is their play is what's dictated this potential for movement.
Now, how should we be rooting for them to get into the lottery? Like, how important is getting into the lottery?
Well, I guess is how important So you're saying there's a chance if you're in the lottery, if you can jump up.
Or
I am not a
position.
draft expert. Listen to me. I'm not a draft expert, but from what you read and what you hear is about that this is an okay draft, not one of those 25-person player deep drafts. So, but with all that said, we can say all that, and then there's years where people are like, oh, that guy was drafted in the second round, and boom, he took off. With all that said, if it's going down and you end up trying some younger players, some different players, I mean. I'm going to be very curious, Fred, what they do with a couple of young guys, coming up by the end of this week. Do they send them back down and just let them play in the American League? Let them grow, let them touch the puck more, let them score more, etc.
And some of that would also be based on their availability for postseason play.
Right, you have to be on the AHL roster by Friday.
Yeah.
So if you see that, to be able to play in the playoffs.
I want to guard against myself. Reading too much into some of that stuff.
Exactly. So that's just part of the protocol. You have to be on what's called the clear roster, clear day or clear roster to be able to go down there to play. Wouldn't surprise me in a couple of games, especially if they don't have good results coming up, that a couple of guys go down and play, and then you're calling up some different guys. And if you end up, if look, everybody works their asses off. These guys, they're pros. They're not having success right now, but I will never doubt them, okay? But if they're not having success and they end up losing and they get a potential for a higher pick, okay, you take that.
Well, the wheels have fallen off. They have.
Yeah, in the last 8 games they have 1 win.
Yeah, so the wheels have fallen off. The injuries are what they are. The team's just not good on the ice right now, talent-wise, in comparison to other NHL teams. I mean, Nashville's no powerhouse, and
Nashville's terrible.
They came in and doubled you up last night.
You could tell. It's funny. They had a brutal start, and you could tell that they were mentally struggling to get going, which you want them to be able to shake it off. Again, I recognize the human element of it, but you want somebody there to make the big hit, make the big play. They got going finally a bit in the third, and you saw the celebration by Morgan Geekie. What a year he's had again, now 20+, and good for Morgan. And that'll be an interesting scenario too, guys, because he's under contract. When I say under contract, he's controlled for 1 more year as a restricted free agent. So does that make him, on the one hand, do you keep him and try and get him for at least a year or two to keep him because he's developed great chemistry with Zach and Pasta? Or does that make him even more attractive perhaps to other teams out there because he's got at least a year of term? They're rhetorically asking. I don't know. There's probably both sides that you're going to look at. But he celebrated his goal. You could see the crowd was finally into it. But then this is the part I heard you guys talking this morning for sure about the amount of or lack of fortitude within 2 or 3 minutes to not give up goals in reply. They just kind of foot on gas a little bit, and then the foot was completely off the gas. And that's a bummer. That stinks.
Yeah. All right. So, you think there's going to be more moves now. And just to reiterate, were you surprised at the quality of the return for Frederick?
I was happy with the return. Yeah, was I surprised? No, because when you start seeing, so there was a player, you wouldn't know him, up in Montreal who was talked about. His name's Jake Evans. He's going to be traded, having a real good year. And they were talking he's going to be traded. And all the rumors and all the people you talk to, you're hearing about, second round pick. I'm like, well, if that's a second round pick, then Trent Frederick's a second round pick. Okay. You're gonna get that the higher return. You said it last week. It seems like more of a seller's market, and right now, it absolutely seems like more of a seller's market.
Yeah, and so it will be interesting. And obviously, if a guy has term, that's gonna
term's key.
Is key.
Potentially key.
Can you even make a prediction? We were trying to do this a little bit earlier, Billy, talking about, all right, if they weren't to do any other major moves, there's still a lot of work to be done with this team, presumably with involving the coach and other players and all kinds of stuff, right? Yeah. Everything's in play. Can you even start to make a prediction as to when we might get some high-level, watchable form of product again? And again, we're still going to watch. I'm not saying don't watch, but when you're talking like a legitimate playoff team again.
I'm sorry for this. I'm going to say, listen, you got to give me into the early off season.
That's fair, but is it out of the question to think like they could turn a lot of this around by next year?
I already brought this up to you guys last week or the week before about the Washington Capitals were able to do it from last year from a in and out play. They ended up making the A seed and they make it into the playoffs. And this year they're much, much better. I think they have a few things going in their favor. The energy of Alex Ovechkin's march to Gretzky's record has helped. But the other thing that they have that the Bruins, we don't know if they have. They have 2 or 3 really good young talented players that they brought in, then 7 new players, all in the 29, 30-year-old range or so but to help fill out their roster, and it worked. The Bruins need to have, we're seeing it from Lowry. One of the best things, perhaps, in fact, since coming out of the break, because it hasn't been the overall team play, has been Lowry's play. It's not perfect. There's going to be mistakes. But we have seen a 4-minute increase in his average time on ice, and he's taken the proverbial bull by the horns, and it's been better. You're still going to see some defensive issues.
Yeah, he's just so
that's normal.
That's
hey, listen, Denny Potvin always said this to me, 250 minimum games for an NHL defenseman to get even really going. Like, that's what it takes.
Okay, so does the development of Lowry maybe make it a little easier to trade a defenseman?
Maybe, yeah, it does, because you look and you say, okay, can we see him now in our top 4? And so now you brought up a name, Brandon Carl. I'm just using him as an example. They're night and day different, the type of defenders they are. So there's still a thought process behind that. You say, okay, wait a second. If we trade a person of that ilk who plays a much more defensive game, who plays a much more controlled game, a much more match game type of thing, how does that impact our team? Again, it's all about what is your return going to be, that then you end up saying we will try to do this. We can afford to take that chance.
And then also, if you want to compete next year, you have to think, well, how much does this really matter? If we can improve in other ways, if we can use free agency and we can use cap space and we can use assets.
So there's going to be all that. And that's why between now and free agency, especially now in the draft, because the draft is before the UFA period opens up by a week. There still could be a ton of move for this Bruins squad, given if they are able. I'll call in Friday. Oh, you're off Friday. We'll call in Friday and we can talk about it. We can see what they do by Friday at 3:00, because I do think it will also help. Maybe some of the things they don't do here will help set the table for moves that they do by the draft.
And this is just a last question. It's kind of just the way things go with big name players. Is it kind of hold your cards until the end, in that, they got rid of, there's been fairly large trades that have happened now already. But if there is a player that's a bigger name, do you philosophically or traditionally, does it happen that you kind of let the teams panic that won them?
Yeah,
player A.
I get you. No, I get
Vegas and Colorado won them. Do you wait until
let them get into it? Let them go, and then you go back and forth a little bit. I think you're gonna. I'm guessing the managers are. If they feel that somebody comes back and says that on Thursday at 8 o'clock at night, whatever, and say, all right, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to sweeten this, and I'm going to give this offer to you right now, and otherwise not, I'm going to go get somebody else, then you might have to pull the trigger on that. But I do think you wait closer to Thursday, Friday.
And the only reason I ask is for us that are paying attention to this, like if nothing has happened by Friday morning, if we should be concerned. That's the only reason
I just think whether it's a mega move, I don't know if I see a mega, but a significant move, I think the Bruins will do one more move at least by Friday, and then I think that, I know they will continue to look at doing stuff up to the draft. And then they will utilize, they're going to have cap space, they're going to have contract space. And again, I'm curious to see one other real quick thing here. I don't know the status on Charlie McAvoy. If he can't come back, are they able to utilize again? It's
why would you play him again?
But if he's healthy enough to, you can't put him on LTIR. You can't do that legally.
Yeah.
My point is, would they? I don't know. Would they
Right.
put him on LTIR and then utilize cap space to take some other guys back? I don't know.
Right.
But that's something to consider. But I don't think we're going to see that
by the trade
I hope
deadline.
he's all right
Sure.
to play because why would you play him? I mean, if he's healthy, guy, he already missed earlier.
But I do think it's a compliment to him that he's valuable enough that you wouldn't want to risk any further injury.
I understand, but if he's fully healthy, he's going to want to play too.
All right. Well, what do I know? That's the thing. But so
let's see. I don't.
Would
I don't
you
know
consider Carlo a mega move? No, right?
Well, I would be only.
You would consider that a mega
big move.
Yeah, but you said mega move.
I said
mega move is the market.
No. I said yes. You're right.
Okay.
I would call it a big move. A player who's been here for a long time. A player who a lot of respect, and a player who there's other players too in the Bruins lineup that have a little term left that we touched on before that would help teams out significantly through in their middle of their lineup, which is very important when you're making runs.
Because locally, the only earth-shaking move would be Marchand.
Right.
And
I get what you're saying there.
He doesn't have term or anything, but he's obviously an extraordinarily popular player and
an important.
Yeah,
player.
among the moves that
player.
would actually happen.
Well, if they trade. Billy, you're knee deep in the league, but for everyone else that talks about the Bruins like here and there, the only name that's going to make people crazy is Marchand. Either way, either people are going to be like, "Thank God they did it," or "I can't believe you traded the captain." And it's a big miss.
It's a big name. It's a big name.
If Brad
Huge
Marchand
name.
never plays for the Bruins again, it's going to be weird when you go to games. If you go to a lot of Bruins games, him not being on the ice. I mean, he's been on the team basically since I've lived here. It would be a huge change.
It'd be you're right.
For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.